Thanks for joining us for CBN News Today. I'm Charlene Israel.
And I'm Ephraim Graham. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry arrives in Ukraine today, where tensions continue to escalate with Russia. There are growing fears the countries are on the brink of war, and Western countries are scrambling to convince Russia to back down.
Russia's on the wrong side of history on this.
Even in the face of comprehensive sanctions from the U.S. and other nations, Russia's military has tightened its grip on Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula, with an estimated 16,000 troops in the air, on the ground, and along the seas. That's 10,000 more than previous reports.
The country has plunged into chaos and anarchy.
Russia's President Vladimir Putin rules this area of eastern Ukraine now. And in a news conference today, he warned the West would also suffer damage from the sanctions and called them counterproductive and harmful. And he accused the West of supporting what he called an anti-constitutional coup in Ukraine. Putin says his troops don't want to use force and they're only there to protect ethnic Russians against violence. But many fear this stronghold is only the beginning. CBN's George Thomas is on the ground in the country.
I firmly believe that Russia's President Vladimir Putin has set his sights beyond just the Crimean Peninsula to the eastern regions of Ukraine. Clearly, thousands of Russian forces are in firm control of the Crimean Peninsula. But today, tens of thousands of pro-Russian demonstrators have taken to the streets of many key regions in the east.
The latest unrest unfolds as U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry makes his way to Ukraine in a show of support today, and with the promise of economic assistance. European foreign ministers meeting in Brussels are also sending a warning to Russia.
I hope very much that even at this stage, the government of Russia will see that it is in nobody's interests to continue to intervene in Ukraine's affairs.
Putin has ordered troops participating in military exercises in western Russia near the Ukraine border to return to their permanent bases. But there's still growing worry the people of Ukraine may try to stop Putin, touching off an even bigger conflict. And be sure to stay tuned to CBN News for more extensive reports from George Thomas on the events unfolding there in the region.
The polar vortex is back, sinking much of the nation down into the deep freeze. And as Paul Strand reports, even parts of the country not shivering from the cold are suffering from other weather woes.
Snow, rain, sleet. No, it's not the unofficial slogan for the United States Postal Service, but could be the slogan for the United States itself, as an array of weather has swept across the nation. Sunny California wasn't so sunny, as massive rainfall gave way to mudslides. Forecasters called the storm the largest since 2010. Even still, the 12 inches of rain wasn't enough to reverse California's drought. In Texas, drivers were caught off guard as sleet hit the area. Backups on sleet-covered highways left passengers stranded in their cars for hours. On Interstate 45, traffic stretched on for 30 miles.
How long have you been stuck here?
About 4 hours. I've got work at 3 in College Station, so looks like that's not happening.
In Tennessee, an onslaught of snow and ice gave way to bad driving conditions, even resulting in trouble for salt trucks. A state of emergency was declared as some 61,000 residents were left without power. On Tuesday morning, the biggest concern was ice.
We are concerned about refreezing. Temperatures will drop back down to the single digits. And we won't really get a relief until tomorrow afternoon.
Some took the winter weather worries in stride and felt right at home in the frigid conditions.
I'm Canadian, and frankly, the snowplows don't even come out for a day like this. This is just average winter weather. It's actually quite lovely, and the fact that it's easy to get around on foot, it's great.
Here in the nation's capital, yesterday's story was the snow with up to 8 inches in some areas. It led the federal government to close for the 4th time this season. Today, this return of the polar vortex has brought record-breaking low temperatures. It's in the single digits here, and the last time that happened in D.C. in the month of March was 1873. Paul Strand, CBN News, Washington.
And get this, as temperatures keep dropping, the Great Lakes system is 90% frozen. The Great Lakes Environmental Research Laboratory reports Lake Superior alone is 91% covered by ice, the most since 1994. That percentage is increasing rapidly and may even surpass the 1979 record of 95%. Temperatures are expected to remain below freezing in the next 2 weeks. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration says the extra ice cover stimulates the growth of algae that feeds other living organisms.
President Obama plans to unveil a $4 trillion budget plan for 2015 today. The president and Congress have already agreed on the 2-year budget pact. In his new plan, Obama plans to cut Social Security benefits and put more toward education, job training, and infrastructure. His plan will cut tax breaks for the wealthy while extending tax credit for the working poor. The Democrat-controlled Senate already said they won't advance a new budget this year.
The morning after pill will now be more widely available over the counter. The Food and Drug Administration is allowing generic versions of the drug to be sold without a prescription. The move will make it cheaper for women of any age to get the emergency contraception, and that is causing concern from many who say the drug will be too easy for young girls to access.
The birth control pill is basically the same drug, but this pill is 40 times stronger than the birth control pill. Teva, who is the manufacturer, never did clinical trials on children. We have no idea what it does to their growing bodies.
Before the FDA's decision, the generic and cheaper versions of the morning after pill could only be obtained with a prescription because of a deal with the Plan B manufacturer.
In the United Kingdom, scientists are releasing rules for making test tube babies using sperm and eggs from 3 people. Doctors say the technique could eliminate debilitating and potentially fatal diseases passed from mother to child. Here in the U.S., the Food and Drug Administration is also considering the technique. Opponents in both the UK and the U.S. say it is unethical and question whether the government should sanction the creation of genetically modified people or so-called designer babies.
Turning now overseas to the brutal civil war in Syria, thousands of Syrians are without food as heavy clashes disrupt the delivery of humanitarian aid in some regions. The United Nations is calling on both sides in the fighting in the Syrian civil war to allow aid to the city of Yarmouk near Damascus. For about a year, regime forces have been stopping aid to the area, meaning no food or medicine has gotten in, causing more than 100 people to die from hunger or hunger-related illnesses.
President Obama is getting directly involved in the push for a Palestinian state. Monday, he met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House. Obama said he supports a Jewish state of Israel and a Palestinian state. Netanyahu said the Palestinians must also recognize Israel as a Jewish state, but they refuse. Obama and Netanyahu also discussed the threat from Iran's nuclear program.
Iran calls openly for Israel's destruction. And so I'm sure you appreciate that Israel cannot permit such a state to have the ability to make atomic bombs to achieve that goal.
We're going to be talking about Iran and my absolute commitment to make sure that Iran does not have a nuclear weapon.
Netanyahu is concerned the U.S. negotiations are helping Iran stall for time as it builds a nuclear bomb.
Israel's enemies are America's enemies. That's one reason polls show an overwhelming majority of Americans support the Jewish state. Given Iran's nuclear ambitions, that support has never been more critical. And as Eric Stakelback reports, Israel's new voice in Washington wants to grow his country's relationship with one of its strongest allies, Christians.
If you think what happens in the Middle East does not affect America, think again.
Iran is building ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles. They're not building it for Israel. Their missiles can already reach Israel.
The target, says Israel's new ambassador to the U.S., is America.
How is this Iran nuclear threat not just an Israel problem? How is it a problem for America as well?
Well, because we're the little Satan. To Iran, you're the great Satan. And the only thing you put on an ICBM is a nuclear warhead. That's it. And they're designed to propel and to be sent thousands of miles across the ocean to try to reach you.
Ron Dermer is uniquely positioned to speak to Americans. Although an Israeli citizen, Dermer was born and raised in the United States. His father and brother both served as mayor of Miami Beach, and Dermer attended the University of Pennsylvania.
My whole belief system is based on being raised in this country. You know, when I think of courage, I think of Normandy, because I was born and raised as an American. And when I think of justice, I think of Martin Luther King Jr.
He moved to Israel in the 1990s and rose to become Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's closest advisor. Yet Dermer told CBN News he still speaks American, a trait that will come in handy as he tries to convince Americans about Iran's true danger.
Iran is the foremost sponsor of terrorism in the world. In the last 3 years alone, they have perpetrated terror attacks in 25 countries on 5 continents. You do not want to give the foremost sponsor of terrorism in the world, you don't want them anywhere close to nuclear weapons, because then you could find those weapons in a theater very close to you.
According to Dermer, the only way to stop Iran's nuclear weapons program comes through crippling sanctions and a credible military threat. As Israel's ambassador, he must make that case directly to the White House. President Obama opposes new sanctions and is committed to dialogue and diplomacy with the Iranian regime.
The only way that this regime in Iran will give up their nuclear weapons program is if they're faced between a choice of the survival of the regime and the weapons program. If that's the choice that Iran faces, then they'll give up the program. If they don't face that choice, they will not give up the program.
In facing Iran and other threats, Dermer says Israel has no greater ally than American Christians.
How important is that Christian support as we move into some pretty perilous times?
I believe that the Christian community of the United States, the tens of millions of Christians, of evangelical Christians throughout this country, can stand shoulder to shoulder with Israel, beat back any attempts to delegitimize, to libel, to malign Israel.
That's one reason Ambassador Dermer says he's looking to strengthen that partnership.
I think in the relationship between Christians and the State of Israel, we have only scratched the surface. There's a lot more to come.
Eric Stackelbeck, CBN News, Washington.
North Korea has released a 75-year-old Australian missionary after 3 weeks detention. John Short was arrested February 16th for secretly distributing Bible tracts at a Buddhist temple in Pyongyang. North Korea deported him this morning after he asked for forgiveness and apologized for committing anti-state religious acts. Short is now at the Australian consulate in Beijing. His wife Karen talked to our CBN News' Gary Lane by phone. She says prayer made the difference.
The prayers of God's people, the support and the encouragement has been amazing. I totally believe and know it was God with me through this as the Lord was with John. I wouldn't trade this experience that I've had for anything.
Mrs. Short says she's heading to Beijing to meet up with her husband, and the first thing she's going to do is give him a hug. To hear more of Karen Short's interview, log on to Gary Lane's blog, The Global Lane. You can find it at cbnnews.com.
Coming up, asylum denied. What's next for this German homeschool family after the U.S. refused to protect them? A German homeschool family has lost its final bid for asylum in the U.S. The U.S. Supreme Court rejected Uwe and Hannelore Maika's appeal. In 2008, the family fled Germany because the state threatened to take their children away if they did not enroll in public school. The U.S. granted the family asylum, but it was later revoked. The Obama administration opposed their bid to live in the U.S. The Romaikas now face deportation to Germany and thousands of dollars in fines. They could also lose custody of their 7 children.
Joining us now with more on the Romaiki case is Mike Donnelly, Director of International Relations for the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. Thanks for joining us.
It's good to be with you, Charlene.
First of all, what does this mean for the Romaiki family? Will they be deported to Germany?
Well, right now, the Romaikis are in a temporary legal status in the United States, but this is the last judicial step in their appeals process, which has been going on for about 6 years. We will be doing everything we can to prevent them from going back to Germany.
And what kind of treatment could they face back in Germany?
Well, if they go back to Germany, they'll be treated just like every other homeschooling family. They're fined tens of thousands of dollars. Custody of their children is threatened and in some cases is actually taken away. They're criminally prosecuted. Very, very serious and harsh treatment for homeschooling families in Germany.
Why do you think the Obama administration opposed asylum for this family?
Well, Charlene, after the immigration judge granted asylum to this family, the Obama administration opposed it every step of the way. They said that homeschooling is not a fundamental right and that the government has the authority to regulate or ban home education, even in this country, something that we would strenuously object to and fight, of course. But you can look at what the Obama administration has done in its actions, and it has not been very friendly to religious freedom, not just in this case, but in other cases as well. So it's not hard to understand why they would oppose granting asylum to this religious family from Germany.
What else can be done to help the Romeike family right now?
Well, the Homeschool Legal Defense Association is reviewing every possible option available to the family. While, as I said, this is the end of the judicial road for the family, it's not the end of the fight. And so we will be looking at all options. We are considering asking Congress to step in, possibly to amend the law or to pass a law for this family. You know, the issue of educational freedom isn't just related to Germany, but there are other countries where homeschoolers are not treated well.
Does this case have any implications for homeschooling in America?
Well, the Supreme Court has denied to hear the case, so there's no implication there. The Sixth Circuit's ruling was specifically about asylum law. In the United States, homeschool laws are at the state level, so there hasn't been any impact on homeschooling freedom in the United States.
Okay, well, Mike Donnelly, thanks for joining us and for your insights. We'll keep an eye on this case.
Thank you.
Up next, the wealthy, brightest, and best. They're fleeing France in droves. Find out why and what the implications are for the U.S. Coming up after this.
Well, they're fed up and they're getting out. People are fleeing France because they've had enough of high taxes.
They are tired of living in a huge welfare state with too much government regulation, and some of them are warning America that we are on the very same path. Dale Hurd brings us this story now from Paris.
They're leaving. The wealthy, the best and the brightest. They're saying goodbye to a France they believe doesn't want them to succeed or become wealthy. According to one poll, half of all young adults in France would leave the country if they could, because the future looks so bleak.
It's pretty tough to be successful in a nation where the president says he doesn't like rich people and where the taxes keep going higher and higher. And so the wealthy have hit the exits, and more business people are saying they've had enough.
The French have had it.
French journalist Anne-Elisabeth Moutet created a sensation in France with her story in the London Telegraph about those who are leaving France.
It's the rich, it's the entrepreneurs, and it's the young who say, if I can, I will leave. If I speak a foreign language, I will leave. If I can go and create something somewhere else, I will leave.
Moutet drew a lot of fire from the French establishment and media, so much fire that the attacks on her became a story itself.
Well, the people who disagree with me think that I'm a traitor. They say, you know, you could say this in France, but you can't say this abroad.
France still suffers from a toxic Marxist heritage. The French left hates what it calls Anglo-Saxon capitalism. But France today is trapped by a welfare state that is an addiction that it can no longer afford. A welfare state that is killing jobs and economic opportunity. Paris economist Jacob Arfeitson.
The entrepreneurial young people of France, they are heading elsewhere. They're going to London, they're going to Asia, they're going to the United States because they want to actually achieve something which is not immediately taken away by a state that says, you have, therefore I take it.
This video produced by the Canadian government shows a French expatriate explaining how easy it is to make a new life in French-speaking Quebec. The most recent statistics available show that 26,000 French families left in 2010 and 35,000 in 2011. London is now called the 6th largest French city. French tax lawyer Jean-Philippe Delsol has heard so many complaints from his business clients over the years about excessive taxes and regulations that he compiled them all in a book entitled Why I Will Leave France.
And the problem in France, more than in all the other countries, is that taxes, the level of taxes, kind of taxes, is changing almost every day. Too difficult to manage a company in France, too difficult to hire people, too difficult to fire people.
Last week, the man who said he doesn't like rich people, French President François Hollande, was trying to lure top executives back to France. But for foreign businesses, warning signs abound. French union workers have a habit of kidnapping their bosses when their demands aren't met. It happened again last month at the Goodyear tire plant in Amiens, which Goodyear wants to close. When France's industrial minister tried to get Goodyear to reconsider, the American CEO in a leaked letter bluntly asked, "How stupid do you think we are?" I visited the factory a couple of times. The French workforce gets paid high wages but works only 3 hours. They told me that's the French way. Make no mistake, there are still plenty of talented and hardworking Frenchmen, many of them frustrated with the system. But Moutet says the political establishment and the media would rather stigmatize those who are leaving than face up to France's problems, which are deep.
With an overlay of these are bad French people, these are traitors, they're going abroad, we don't want them.
When France's wealthiest man announced he was leaving over the nation's new super tax on the rich, he got the journalistic equivalent of a kick out the door.
The full headline in Libération, the only headline on the page was, "Get lost, you rich bastard."
France is now undergoing both a brain drain and capital flight, and risked becoming one of the poorer nations in Western Europe. And Jean-Philippe Del Sol had a warning for Americans, saying the U.S. is following in the steps of France, with Obamacare and an exploding welfare state that will be unsustainable. The French can teach the Americans a thing or two about the trap of the welfare state and how hard it is to escape. Dale Hurd, CBN News, Paris.
And welcome back to CBN News Today. Finally, this hour, CBN's Operation Blessing is supporting work against human trafficking in Nepal.
That's right. OB is working with the Nepali Rescue Project and supporting a border station between India and Nepal. Trained staff intervene and rescue victims before they are trafficked across the border. The girls are taken to safe homes where they receive counseling and even skills training to help them reintegrate into their communities. Many young girls are targeted by traffickers and lured in by the promise of work. So Operation Blessing is also working in villages, offering training and very vital and necessary resources. And I, again, commend Operation Blessing for the amazing things that we're doing around the world.
On the forefront, leading the charge and making a difference.
And this is a big issue. It's human. Sex trafficking is human. Well, that is it for now on CBN News Today. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com.
Be sure to tell us what you think about the stories you've seen here today. We'll see you right back here tomorrow. Make it a terrific Tuesday.